Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning back in to a little bit more of Out of the Dust. This one's called Birthday. I walk to town. I don't look back over my shoulder at the single grave, holding Ma and my little brother. I'm trying not to look back at anything. Dust rises with each step. There's a greasy smell in the air. On either side of the road are the carcasses of jackrabbits, small birds, field mice, stretching out into the distance. My father stares out across his land, empty but for a few withered stalks like the tufts of an old man's head. I don't know if he thinks more of Ma or the wheat that used to grow here. There is barely a blade of grass swaying in the stinging wind. There are only these lumps of flesh that were once hands long enough to span octaves swinging at my sides. I come up quiet and sit behind Arlie Wanderdale's house where no one can see me and lean my head back and close my eyes and listen to Arlie play. That was August of 1934. This one's called Roots. President Roosevelt tells us to plant trees. Trees will break the wind, he says. Trees will end the drought. The animals can take shelter there. Children can take shelter. Trees have roots, he says. They hold on to the land. That's good advice, but I'm not sure he understands the problem. Trees have never been at home here. They're just not meant to be here. Maybe none of us are meant to be here. Only the prairie grass and the hawks. My father will stay no matter what. He's stubborn as sod. Sod is grass. He and the land have a hold on each other. But what about me? It's August of 1934. This is September of 1934. It's called Empty Spaces. I don't know my father anymore. He sits across from me. He looks like my father. He chooses food like my father. He brushes his dusty hair back like my father, but he is a stranger. I am awkward with him and irritated, and I want to be alone, but I'm terrified of being alone. We are both changing. We are shifting to fill in the empty spaces left by Ma. I keep my raw and stinging hands behind my back when he comes near because he stares when he sees them. This one's called The Hole. The heat from the cook stove hurts my burns, and the salt, the water, and the dust hurt too. I spend all of my time in pain, and my father spends his time out the side of the house, digging a hole 40 feet by 60 feet, 60 feet deep. I think he is digging the pond to feed off the windmill, the one Ma wanted, but he doesn't say. He just digs. He sends me to the train yard to gather boards that once were boxcars, but now are junk. I bring them back. The scabs and the raw sores on my bare hands. I don't know what he needs boards for. He doesn't tell me. When he's not in the hole digging, he works on the windmill, replacing the parts and keep it from turning. People stop by and watch. They think my father is crazy digging such a big hole. I think he's crazy too. The water will seep back into the earth. It'll never stay put in any old pond. But my father has thought through all that, and he's digging anyway. I think to talk to Ma about it, and then I remember. I can almost forgive him the taking of Ma's money. I can almost forgive him his night in Gaimon getting drunk. But as long as I live, no matter how big a hole he digs, I can't forgive him that pail of kerosene left by the side of the stove. This one's called Killaloo. A volcano erupted in Hawaii, Killaloo. It threw huge chunks into the air. The ground shook, and smoke choked everything in its path. Sounds a little like a dust storm. That's September of 1934. Boxes. In my closet are 2 boxes, the gatherings of my life. Papers, school drawings, a broken hairpin, a dress from my baby days, my first lock of hair, a tiny basket woven from prairie grass, a doll with a china head, a pink ball, 3 dozen marbles, a fan from Baxter's funeral home, my baby teeth in a glass jar, a torn map of the world, 2 candy wrappers, 1,000 things I haven't looked at in years. I kept promising to go through the boxes with Ma and get rid of what I didn't need, but I never got to it, and now my hands hurt, and I haven't gotten the heart. This one's called Night Bloomer. Mrs. Brown's Ceres plant bloomed on Saturday night. She sent word after promising I could come and see it. I rubbed my gritty eyes with swollen hands. My stomach grizzled as I made my way through the dark to her house. Ma wouldn't have let me go at all. My father just stood in the doorway and watched me leave. It was almost 3 in the morning when I got there. A small crowd stood around. Mrs. Brown said, "The blossom opened at midnight, big as a dinner plate. It took only moments to unfold. But can such a flower find a way to bloom in this drought and this wind? It blossomed at night when the sun couldn't scorch it and when the wind was quiet, when there might have been a sip of dew to freshen it. I couldn't watch at dawn when the flower, touched by the first finger of morning light, wilted and died. I couldn't watch as the tender petals burned up in the sun." This one's called The Path of Our Sorrow. Miss Freeland said, "During the Great War, we fed the world. We couldn't grow enough wheat to fill all the bellies. The price the world paid for our wheat was so high it swelled our wallets and our heads, and we bought bigger tractors, more acres, until we had mortgages and rent and bills beyond reason. But we all felt so useful we didn't notice. Then the war ended, and before long, Europe didn't need our wheat anymore. They could grow their own. But we needed Europe's money to pay our mortgage, our rent, our bills. We squeezed more cattle, more sheep onto less land, and they grazed down the stubble till they reached root. And the price of wheat kept dropping, so we had to grow more bushels to make the same amount of money we made before. To pay for all the equipment, all the land, and all the more sod we plowed up, the drier things got because the water that used to collect there under the grass, biding its time, keeping things alive through the dry spell, wasn't there anymore. Without the sod, the water vanished, the soil turned to dust until the wind took it, lifting it up and carrying it away. Such a sorrow doesn't come suddenly. There are 1,000 steps to take before you get there. But now sorrow climbs up our front steps, big as Texas, and we didn't even see it coming, even though it'd been making its way for us all along." That was September of 1934, where we will pause and we will pick up next time on autumn of 1934.